In the Outlaw Studio today, we have country music artist Dusty Rust. How's it going, Dusty?
Pretty good. Thank you for having me out.
Thanks for being here. You are from Kelso, Washington. You are a country music artist. Please tell us about who you are and what you do.
Well, I'm actually out of Kelso, Washington these days. I used to be called the Kansas City Cowboy because I was out of Kansas City, Missouri, but now I'm the Cowlitz County Cowboy.
On that note, you are in the Outlaw Studio at Washougal Times Restaurant and Lounge.
I'm pretty stoked to be here. It's always an absolute honor and privilege to come play folks like this, the places like this where never been before, and just meeting Ben, the owner, and stuff. It's been a great experience down here, especially since I came in here years ago when it was it Heller Bar? Was that the name it used to be called?
Used to be called Heller's.
Heller's, that's right. I was confused because there's a boat launch out on the Snake River in Hell's Canyon called Heller's Bar. That's why it's called Heller's. That being the old sign, it kind of a memory triggering thing. But came in here, and then man, Ben's done an incredible job remodeling the place. Looks amazing, and it's I've had a couple beers here. He's got the coldest beer in Clark County, I think. I'm pretty confident in that.
Well, he'll hear that, but let's let him know, and that'll make him smile.
Yeah, absolutely. They're cold and they're delicious. So.
That's Ben Jackson, owner and operator of Washougal Times Restaurant and Lounge. We have him here in the Outlaw Studio from time to time making announcements such as you playing and other artists. But speaking of artists, Outlaw Country listeners enjoy classic country and outlaw country. Would you please share about your favorite classic country or outlaw country artists?
Well, if there was one person to talk about when it comes to classic country, that when my brain goes back to that thought, if you go to my Instagram account, you go look at instagram.com/DustyRust, whatever. Not whatever. Don't type that in there. Who knows what you'll get. But you'll see I'm following one person, and that person's Merle Haggard. I'm always on a mountain when I fall. One of the greatest songs ever written. The entire album that came off is amazing. And when talking about Outlaw Country 102.7 FM, it's actually found out about it through my wife a couple years ago when we moved back in the area. It was an incredible experience because they introduced me to all kinds of B-sides and stuff I've never heard before. It's hard to pinpoint one favorite country artist. I heard my first Eddie Nowak cut, that I'd never heard before on the station. And so it kept me listening, as long as I could get reception, like every so often it would just kind of, I've got, it's an old Astra van. I call it the Disastro van because it's kind of falling apart. The doors are, my wife wants me to sell it, but, it just keeps running. So I keep driving it. But anyway, it's, I just kept listening to the station and to find all these great B-sides and artists I've never heard of before that were phenomenal. They've written phenomenal songs, had phenomenal recorded performances, and so I just, I've been a big fan of the station for a number of years at this point.
Thank you for being a listener, and I bet we can find that Merle Haggard song you referenced and play it along with this interview. Next, I want to be sure I read from a recent article about you, Dusty Rust. It said, Rust is capable of bringing poise, subtlety, and texture to the table in paying reverence to the cowboy tradition, but with a unique presence. I'd love for you to expand on that.
Well, I'm a little shy about the interview process, and to be perfectly honest with you, I don't actually read interviews or listen to interviews that I've done in the past. It's just I always find it a little strange talking about myself, but that's a very a humbling statement. I'm honored that they feel that way about me, but honestly, I just kind of show up and do the best I can with what I've got, and whatever that may be. I mean, I try to come well armed. I mean, I pay quite a bit of attention to the history of country music, and I do work at it. I practice. I bring my work ethic to the table when it comes to making good country music. It means a lot of different things to different people, and you're not going to please everybody, and I understand that. But at the same time, that's beautiful. Somebody said that about me. That's very well appreciated.
Your nature now is humble, which was very similar to our pre-interview discussion. Nonetheless, you have quite a presence, and I believe the folks at Washougal Times in the local region who come to see you play are going to get a chance to not only appreciate your humbleness, but certainly your presence and your musical expertise. So I'm not going to ask you about you immediately, but I'm going to come back to about you after asking you this. What musical instruments do you play?
Well, good Lord. There's a well, the better question is which ones do I play well? I started out playing drums when I was probably 2 or 3 years old. My dad got me one of those little kits because my dad was a musician and played in a band out in Lewiston, Idaho, and bought me some drumsticks when I was a little kid. But I used to beat the hell out of all the furniture, and so I broke some lamps and broke some tiles on the fireplace, and they had enough of that, so they got me a kit. So I just stay stationary and not break the whole house down. And then from that, my dad had this beautiful old Gibson SG. It's a relic these days. But yeah, I used to tote that thing around, like it was nothing, and play the crap out of that. And it was just funny. My dad was a guitar player, a gifted one, and he'd never show me how to play. So I wound up going to the library and checking out some books on how to play a D and a C and a G, and it changed my life. And then eventually it led up to I learned the A chord, and then when I learned the D, A, and the G, turned me on to Creedence Clearwater because I learned Bad Moon Rising, first song I ever learned to play on the guitar. And then eventually, we had an old, it wasn't a Steinway, what was it? It was a Wurlitzer, an old Wurlitzer piano that was around the house. So my dad played that quite a bit. He'd always play Let It Be, and he'd sit down and play it and sing it. And, so I learned those and learned some basic chords. And then we had an old air organ we used to play. We had an accordion. I don't play that at all. I tried a couple times. I tried fiddle. I failed miserably. Don't play fiddle. Banjo. My wife bought me a banjo a few years ago. Very counterintuitive instrument, but I just sat down because it was one of those things where, you piss yourself off enough by failing that you just keep at it. And then so I got pretty good at the banjo. And then, I used to think I could play some slide guitar. I do play a little bit. I can kind of get around. But then I got a good friend of mine who's his name's Chad Graves. He actually played on my Stolen Horse record, which was the second to the last release, and a very gifted musician. And I realized how far I had to go when I watched him play the slide guitar. I realized there's a learning curve here that I haven't quite gotten to yet.
Speaking of records and John Fogerty, we got to connect on your most recent album, specifically named Secret Desert, and the John Fogerty's cabin element to recording that album. However, Dusty, let's play a couple of your songs on the radio, then come back and have you tell your story about recording your most recent album, Secret Desert. So if agreeable, I'll ask you 2 more questions. We'll play a couple of your songs on the radio. We'll come back to have you specifically address the John Fogerty cabin, as well as some Dale Watson stories.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounds magnificent, yeah.
What do you have in store to be recorded next?
Well, the next project I'm working on is actually with a buddy of mine from South Carolina. His name's Chance Howland. Very gifted young man. Got a hell of a voice on him. Sings really well. And so I'm actually building a recording studio right now in my basement. I'm hoping a lot of my friends are going to come out and make some records there because, I don't want to build this place and just have it sit dormant, because I can only record so much of myself. So I'm kind of looking to document a lot of the Northwest country scene as well as like some of the national acts that I've gotten the privilege to know, over the years of just being out on the road. Anyway, Chance is coming in, and so we're looking forward to making that record. And I've also got a couple singles coming down the pipeline. Probably this fall, actually. I think we'll be debuting. So I just kind of got inspired by Charlie Crockett, actually another modern country artist, and we've kind of been thinking, why do we have to wait a couple years in between releases? Why not just get an idea, record it, and put it out?
You bet. So there's a snapshot of the future. How about we wrap this part 1 of the interview up and play some of your current songs, which will be a snapshot of the present. Then we'll get back together and take a look at your past.
Okay.
And go from there.
All right, sounds good.
Okay, here's some music by Dusty Rust.
Damn, you did that on a dime.
Yeah.
Just right 10 minutes.
Outlaw World, Hondo here. We are back in the Outlaw Studio at Washougal Times Restaurant and Lounge, visiting with Dusty Rust, country music artist Dusty Rust, who's going to jump right into some stories about the recording of his most recent album, Secret Desert.
Yeah, that's right. Some fun talking points there. I mean, particularly where it's recorded and the inspiration behind it. Years ago, I'd heard that John Fogerty owned property out in, Enterprise, Oregon. And everybody else said Enterprise, Oregon. And I was like, okay, well, no kidding, Growing up, especially like I remember being in the second grade, there's a guy that was a Cracker Jack mechanic lived next door, and he always had CCR playing, and it was like, Who'll Stop with the Rain and Fortunate Son and just, CCR hit after CCR hit. So years and years and years have gone by, and then I've kind of became Dusty Rust as it is, and then I had this weird euphoric thought when I was out. I don't even know what the hell I was doing. Maybe drinking some Jefferson's Reserve or something. Probably was just right here at the Washougal Times, and I kind of had this thought, and I was like, I wonder what is that property? What happened to it? And I looked it up, and it turns out it's an Airbnb. You can rent it these days. There was some brothers that bought it from John Fogerty, and they had it as a fishing cabin for a number of years, and then they turned it into an Airbnb as of just a few years ago. And obviously during the high times, the peak times of steelhead season and stuff, it gets rented out and people go out there. And so I wrote him permission because obviously I didn't know anything. Troy is a really small town, and I didn't want to piss anybody off, because we're gonna be up there late and making music. And I wrote them an email, and they were completely fine with a recording session being held there. But then getting to the cabin, I didn't realize the history there, like how John Fogerty and some of his backing band at the time, for his solo acts, had actually helped him build the cabin. And the fact that his piano, this old Kimball upright, was still in there, and they actually maintain it they keep it on an interior wall, and they tune it just like you should keep a piano. And sitting right on top of it, there's like 3 harmonicas, like in the key of E, C, and G, I think. And they're all just sitting right there, and like, this is actually John Fogerty's stuff, And so we utilized all that stuff because we brought a keyboard out thinking, well, we have to track the keyboard. But, well, it turns out the piano was perfectly in tune and everything. So we just used all that stuff on this new record. So we're basically playing John Fogerty stuff in John Fogerty's cabin. So as a fanboy, I mean, this is a dream come true on this record. And I feel like the inspiration kind of came through. It's definitely my best work to date, for sure.
I believe it. I have a special connection with Troy, Oregon specifically. So John Fogerty's cabin was in Troy, Oregon, which is outside of Enterprise. Mm-hmm. Wow. Would you mind expanding on anything else you noted about Troy, about that region?
The lack of self-service. It was a thing of beauty. I loved it. We came in through the Bagwoods. We came in from Enterprise, head northbound. Came in through Flora, Oregon, right? Mm-hmm. And we wound through some gravel roads. There had been a recent snow because it was recorded in late April, and there had been a recent snow, and so some of the gravel roads getting there and then the corners going down there, man, there was some tight corners. I mean, it was like you look down that hill, and man, how like you get that feeling in your gut, like ugh,
Know that feeling. That's some beautiful mountain river country out there in Northeast Oregon.
Yep.
Troy, Oregon. Thanks for mentioning that. I really am glad that got included in this interview.
Yeah.
Dusty, it's great to know you. I'm really glad we had this opportunity to meet. I hope you'd consider coming back to the Outlaw Studio and doing another interview session.
You bet.
I'm going to close us out with a couple more questions. One of these is submitted by an Outlaw listener.
Okay.
Do you refer to the evening meal as supper or dinner? And what are your thoughts on food, barbecuing, kitchen life, restaurants, favorite foods, etc.?
That is a good question. Well, I'm torn because supper is probably the right answer, but I say dinner. So, I mean, I'm a conflicted human being, just like I'm sure the rest of us are. My thoughts on like barbecuing and stuff, like, is there anything wrong with a smoker? I mean, I myself have a little box called it's a Smoke Hollow. It's like a Bi-Mart special. I've always looked at like the fancy ones. You can get the Bluetooth and all that, which is great. You can monitor everything. But I'm like, I'm old school. I'm happy with just like, man, let me fire that box up. And if the smoke starts coming out, okay, well, it's probably ready. It's got thermostat on there so I can see the temp. I'm good. I'm really good at drinking beer and watching the temperature of the smoker. I can do brisket. One of my favorite days on vacation a couple of years ago, I did an 18-pound brisket. It took about 18 hours, but then everybody just thought I was nuts.
Thank you for sharing. You are Dusty Rust. Your website is dustyrust.com. That's DUSTYRUST.com. Your most recent album is Secret Desert. Please speak to specific songs that you would like to share and talk about.
Okay. Well, yeah, I should probably talk about maybe the opening track first and foremost, Rose Without a Home. Probably the most energetic track on that record. It's an interesting combination because, I have a rock and roll background just as much as I have a country background. And Rose Without a Home is like my impressions of Marty Robbins meets Thin Lizzy. So if anybody could ever even imagine something like that, that is my best impression of that. The third track on the record is called Outside Looking In. There's actually a video on it on YouTube if you guys want to look at that. It's a really good track. It's like the acoustical one, and it's the only one that I played drums on the record. It was kind of funny. My drummer and I actually tracked the drums in his bedroom when he was living out in Seattle, Washington at the time. Unfortunately, I think we had a bottle of Four Roses bourbon with us, and I think that got to the best of us. And for some odd reason, I just was able to get the take done. And so I still hold that over his head a little bit. So and for that, I think he owes me some money too. I don't know. So we'll let him know.
We'll let him know. I'd like to address one common ground topic with the Outlaw Country listeners. Right, we are 102.7 and Outlaw.fm. Outlaw Country Music. You play country music. I feel like you play outlaw country music. Would you speak to your thoughts on outlaw country music, etc.?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny. Dale Watson is a Texas country music artist, and he has this thing called the Ameripolitan Awards down in Texas. Well, one day, randomly, I got an email saying that I've been nominated for the Ameripolitan Awards. And he said I was nominated for Outlaw Country Music Artist of the Year, which I thought was hilarious because I honestly don't consider myself an outlaw. I mean, I've been in cuffs, but never been to jail. I'm not but it means different things. I mean, if you look at the actual outlaw, it's just kind of going against the grain, which of what Nashville wants, which certainly, of course, I do. But that's nothing new, or anything. But I'm not remaking any kind of wheels or nothing. But it was interesting enough because the other nominees were Scott H. Byram and Hank III, which I thought was highly unusual. I'm like, well, I'm completely outclassed because these guys are head and shoulders above me. Like, I don't know what I've got no business being here. And there was also a lot of vitriol in Kansas City about that too, because I've got a lot of friends and well, Dusty's never done anything wrong. He's not beating anybody up or doing anything crazy there in the Kansas City scene. So it was kind of a funny thing. But the things that I do that probably would qualify me as an outlaw, if you wanted to label me that, would be that I'm definitely not afraid to take musical risks. I mean, I've got no problem blending and bobbing and weaving because when I was in high school, a lot of people don't know this about me, but I played drums in a band with Esperanza Spalding, who's a Grammy award-winning jazz musician. I mean, we were buddies for a number of years in high school. I got no problem bobbing, weaving and blending music. I think that's the best part about it. And I think that's probably the thing that makes me a country music outlaw.
Dusty, one of the best things about being a DJ is interviewing artists, specifically country music artists, outlaw country music artists. I want to say it's great to meet you. It's great to have you here in the Outlaw Studio. Let's make it known one last time. You're going to be back here at Washougal Times. That's you, Dusty Rust, country music artist, Dusty Rust. Your website is dustyrust.com.
Yes, sir. That's correct. And Hondo, I'd like to say thank you again for having me out here on the air, man. I can't tell you how much it tickles me to be here.
My pleasure. How about we go have a beer?
Sounds like a plan to me.
Outlaw World, this is DJ Hondo turning you back over to some outlaw country music. Boom, bro.
Hondo? Thanks, sir.
Dusty, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Man, I hope you feel good about that. If you're able to stick around, I'd love to come exchange more pleasantries. But
Yeah, you bet.
I'm going to fire up the radio.